Welcome to the recorded version of Holistic Aging, Mind, Body, and Soul, part of the Family Caregiver Support webinar series brought to you by the American Society on Aging and a generous sponsorship from Homestead Senior Care. Okay, our presenter today is Lakeland Hogan. Lakeland is a gerontologist and caregiver advocate for Homestead Senior Care. She works to educate professionals, families, and communities on issues older adults face. Lakeland is a doctoral candidate at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, where she is studying social gerontology. She has a Master of Arts in Social Gerontology and a Master's in Business Administration from UNL. Lakeland has professional experience in the private and public sectors of senior care services. She has worked on special projects for UNO's Department of Gerontology and the local area agency on aging. Lakeland serves as Vice President of the Board of Directors for the Dreamweaver Foundation and is active in the Alzheimer's Association's Walk to End Alzheimer's. Lakeland has a passion for helping others, especially aging adults and their families. And with that, I would like to turn the floor over to Lakeland Hogan, our presenter today. Welcome, Lakeland.
Thank you so much, Steve. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to be talking about holistic aging in relation to the older adult's mind, body, and soul. I'm excited this is a new topic for us in 2018, and I encourage you to leave me some comments in your CEU application as to how you liked it. If there's any areas of today's presentation you want me to dive in deeper on, I'm definitely going to consider all of your comments when I'm developing next year's schedule of CEU presentations. So again, excited that you've joined me today to talk about holistic aging. And holistic aging has really become kind of a buzzword that we often hear about, but the meaning behind it can sometimes be confusing. So my hope today is to give you a better understanding of a holistic approach to aging and practical ways that us as professionals can help family caregivers integrate holistic aging into the care of their aging loved ones. And caregivers themselves can also take a holistic approach to their lifestyle and ensure that they're practicing self-care, which we know is very important in preventing caregiver burnout and for the wellness of the caregivers that we work with. So I want to start out by putting a little context to the word holistic. So the term holistic comes from the Greek word holism, which means all, whole, entire, or total. So when we talk about holistic aging, it's not just focusing on the older adult's physical health or just focusing on their mental health. It really is looking at all of that and how it works together, kind of like the pieces of a puzzle. Each one fits together to form a whole. So the components of holistic aging work together for the successful aging of the older adult. And when we talk about holistic aging, there are two common definitions that you're likely to hear about. The first definition is kind of what I just described. Holistic as an approach of a whole person made up of independent parts. So you're most likely to hear these parts referred to as, the mind, body, soul, mind, body, spirit, the physical, mental, emotional aspects of aging. And when this meaning is applied to, let's say, an illness, there might be a holistic approach in terms of the medicine to treat the illness. And this could include a number of factors. So when you talk about holistic medicine, it talks more about dealing with the root cause of an illness. And it might also include increasing the patient involvement and then also integrating conventional and complementary or alternative treatment options. And a holistic approach really does encompass that entire person, the interdependent system. So to kind of give you an example of how a holistic approach might be taken when it comes to an older adult, let's consider Mrs. Jones, who is experiencing an increase in fatigue, a lack of appetite, and ongoing headaches. So a doctor that doesn't take a holistic approach might just jump right into, treating those headaches, making sure that they're eating better. But a holistic approach would take a step back and look at Mrs. Jones kind of from a whole person perspective to try to understand what are the underlying causes of these specific symptoms that are manifesting. So we might come to find out that Mrs. Jones just lost her husband, and she's very grief-stricken, and she's experiencing a lot of stress because she's now having to deal with all of the household affairs on her own. So whereas if we just treated the symptoms of fatigue, loss of appetite, and headaches, we wouldn't have realized that Mrs. Jones might need attention to her mind or her soul. Maybe she needs some counseling, or maybe she needs to go to a grief support group in addition to treating those symptoms. So again, when we talk about holistic, it is truly how all of those elements work together, those pieces of a puzzle fitting together for whole person wellness. Another meaning that you might often hear of is holistic as a synonym for alternative therapies. And by this definition, going holistic means turning away from the conventional medical options and using alternative treatments such as acupuncture, chiropractic treatments, massage therapy, herbal supplements, and so forth. And while I'm not saying that those things are good or bad, but for the purposes of today's webinar, I'm really going to focus on that first meaning. I'm talking about a holistic approach to aging from more of a mind, body, soul perspective. I'm not qualified to talk about the acupuncture and chiropractic, so you might want to speak with the older adults physician about that. So, but now that we know what holistic means, let's look at today's objectives. So in order to understand successful aging, it's important to learn about what stands in the way of an older adult successfully aging. So we're going to start by talking about some of the fears that older adults have about aging. And then we're going to look at ways to promote successful aging with a holistic approach. And we're going to look at a case study of how a university medical center is taking this holistic approach to the care of their older patients. We're also going to move into a discussion of the mind, body, and soul, and we're going to take each of those components and talk about the signs that these different areas might need attention. And then we're going to close with some tips on how to improve those different areas, the mind, body, and soul, and then also leave you with some resources for holistic and successful aging. And before we encourage older adults to take this holistic approach to successful aging, again, it's important to talk about the fears and really understand the fears that older adults have when it comes to aging. When people talk about the aging process, most people look at aging with fear or have a negative view of the aging process. And if you think about it from a societal perspective, a lot of times getting older or older adults might be portrayed in a negative light. From injuries to losing their independence, becoming frail, many people really truly do fear that they're going to lose their abilities as they age. The Home and Said Senior Care Network and the Boomer Project surveyed older adults and found the following to be the top 10 fears of older adults. Of those surveyed, 90% of older adults put loss of independence at the top of their list of aging worries. And if you think about it, ever since a young age, we have been striving towards independence, and being independent is really truly celebrated in our society. From taking that first step to getting the keys to the car and having our first beer, all those steps are really celebrated in parts of our independence, getting married, starting a family. So as we get older and we start to maybe lose those independence, I can certainly understand how that would be one of the top fears among older adults. And some of the other fears include declining health, not being able to remain in their own home, the death of people closest to them, isolation, loneliness, and I'll let you read the rest on your own. But you can see that there are a lot of fears that relate to the aging process. But as professionals, when we talk about aging, we really have the opportunity to change the mindset, not only of the youth in our culture, but of older adults themselves, and move from a place of fear to a place of hope. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the hope that comes along with aging. Again, while many people fear getting older, we know that Americans can truly enjoy a long health span or good health well into their 80s. And this is the conclusion of the Boston University New England Centenarian Study, which found that most people have the genetic makeup to live into their mid to late 80s in very good health. And like centenarians, they compress that time that they're sick towards the end of life. And much of their ability depends on healthy behaviors, such as a diet conducive of being lean or healthy, not smoking, and strength training exercises. And then the study further concluded that instead of the myth that as you get older you get sicker, it's much more the case of the older you get, the healthier you've been. And I really want to pause here and think about this quote, and I'm going to say it again. The older you get, the healthier you have been. A simple mind change like that can really impact how we age and put a more positive spin on it. So what it boils down to is the keys to successful aging are really found in healthy habits and behaviors that can carry us through a longer health span. So let's talk more about successful aging and what it looks like. And we're going to first start with what the literature has to say about successful aging. So what does successful aging mean? And I'll begin by saying that there's not an exact consensus on what the correct term for successful aging is. Some people prefer healthy aging, positive aging, optimal aging, or aging well. But for today's webinar, I'm going to stick to the term successful aging. And there was a recent article written in the Gerontologist that looked at the history of the concept of successful aging. And the article notes that this theme of aging successfully has been found throughout history, culture, and religion dating back centuries. So this really isn't a new concept. But more recently, in the 1980s and 90s, there were two influential individuals who put some structure to the idea of successful aging. So Dr. John Rao and Dr. Robert Kahn conducted a series of studies and eventually outlined successful aging as having three components, and you can see them listed there on the slide. The first is a low probability of disease and disease-related disability. The next is high cognitive and physical functional capacity. And then finally, active engagement with life. And if you think about those three components, they really have some parallels to that holistic aging approach, the mind, body, and soul. But when you think about successful aging, we do know that some older adults face disease and maybe even some sort of disability. So the question is, can they also age successfully? And around the same time that Rowe and Kahn were studying successful aging, researchers Paul and Margaret Baltz developed a different concept, one that focused more on our ability to adapt and function as we age. And their model of successful aging is referred to as the SOC model, and SOC stands for Selective Optimization with Compensation. Selection refers to an individual's focusing their attention on fewer or more important goals. It might also involve rescaling or reconstructing their goals to meet their current abilities. And then for those that have experienced setbacks, they can set goals to work towards. So really what it comes down to is selecting goals that are attainable. And then also optimization involves engaging in goal-directed actions and means. And then compensation refers to maintaining a given level of functioning in the face of loss and decline in goal-relevant means by individuals investing in compensation means. So the SOC model can get a little complicated. So I wanted to give you an example to further illustrate what this all means. So let's say someone has a stroke in their older age. They can still work towards successful aging. So according to the SOC model, they would need to select goals to work towards. And perhaps for this individual that had a stroke, regaining function on one side of the body becomes the goal. So they select that as the goal. And then they engage in goal-directed actions, such as committing to occupational therapy to rebuild those skills. So they're optimizing those goal-directed actions to rebuild the skills suffered or the skills lost by the stroke. And if they do not fully regain those skills, then they would look for other ways to compensate for those losses. Perhaps they regain a lot of their function, but not enough to drive themselves and to transport themselves in their vehicle. So then they would seek out a transportation service or an alternate mode of transportation to compensate, but still maintain their independence and age successfully in their new set of circumstances. So overall, the SOC model says that we can still be successful at aging even with setbacks. We just need to focus on overcoming the challenges and find ways to optimize and compensate if needed. So you can see that there are standard definitions of successful aging that is outlined in the literature, but there are also some societal trends that can influence what successful aging looks like. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. As a society, we're starting to change from a negative view of aging to one that celebrates aging. I know if you're working in the aging space, you probably feel that more so than maybe other industries, but in my opinion, we're on the right track. We're making some progress. And research shows that those who have a positive view of aging will actually stay healthier longer. So positivity can make a big impact. And as a society and as professionals, if we can keep a positive view, we can help to change that mindset of one to successful, healthy aging. Just because we get older does not mean that our life is meaningless and purposeless. So as a society, we need to recognize that older adults still have a lot to contribute. And we can encourage older adults to continue finding meaning and purpose later in life. And another way that our society can influence successful aging is recognizing that older adults can still learn and grow. That saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, well, this is a myth when it comes to getting older. The brain can continue to learn as we age. The learning process might look a little different than it did when that person was younger, maybe in their grade school or high school years, but they should not be discouraged from trying something new or learning a new skill. In my own family, my grandparents who are in their 80s, they have an iPad, and I just introduced them to an app that can help them learn some of the basics of Spanish. And they spend their winters down in Texas, so they were excited to be able to speak Spanish to some of the people in the area. So again, they're not being discouraged by that you can't teach old dogs new tricks mentality. They are going for it. So older adults still have a lot to learn and contribute. And adaptability is another key to successful aging, and I just kind of talked about that in the SOC model. But older adults are bound to have changes that come about with aging physically. They'll change a little bit, but they can still adapt and live a full life. And in today's society, technology is becoming a real important key to helping older adults adapt. And technology's contribution to successful aging could truly be a webinar in and of itself, so I'm not going to dive much deeper into that, but there's all sorts of technologies that are being introduced that can help older adults age successfully. And then another key factor of successful aging is learning to reconcile our failings. I've seen many older adults get easily discouraged by a setback or a mistake. But it's important to remember, and as a society it's important to remember, that our mistakes make us who we are. They help us to learn and grow. So if we can help older adults practice accepting those failures or those setbacks and see the good that come from them, they will be able to age more successfully. And again, ties back into that positivity. That mindset of positivity can really help them age more successfully. And I don't know about you, but for me, the bullets on this slide are really what excite me about working with the older adult population. No two older adults are the same, and they each have been through a lifetime of experiences. So they have so much wisdom and have learned various life lessons, many of which come from overcoming challenges, failures, or setbacks. So all of this needs to be celebrated and appreciated. And if those that work with older adults or around older adults see the value in aging, then it can help contribute to that person's successful aging. So again, as a society, we can help to foster that view of positivity and successful aging. And I wanted to point out some leaders that are really helping to shape the way we view the aging process and successful aging. First, there's a company that's working to support successful aging, and that's Home Instead Senior Care. At Home Instead, our mission as the world's largest home care provider is to change the face of aging. And we want older adults to have independence and choice in their aging journey. So as an organization, we're not only focused on providing home care, but we also advocate on a national and global level for more positive aging experiences for all adults. Another leader in the industry is AARP. Many of us know them. They are changing the way we view aging in their recent campaign called Disrupt Aging. And the focus of this campaign is living your best life at any age. So they're changing the narrative when it comes to aging. And I'm going to share their website at the end of today's webinar. But if you log on to their site, they have some really neat videos of intergenerational interactions that really change younger people's view of getting older. So again, they're leading the charge and changing the narrative around successful aging and what that can look like. And then one last person, there are many people out there doing great work, but another person I wanted to highlight as a leader in changing the narrative around aging is Dr. Bill Thomas. He's known for his healthcare system innovations such as the Eden Alternative and the Greenhouse, and both of which have transformed the acute care services that are provided to older adults. So as a society, we're starting to make strides towards celebrating aging, seeing aging in a new light. And if you've heard this before, age is just a number, we need to remind older adults that we work with that their age doesn't have to define them. They still have unlimited potential. So while the literature and society can guide our aging journey, at the individual level, each person will likely have a different picture of what successful aging means to them. So I want to introduce a tool that you can use with older adults and caregivers to get them thinking about their plan for successful aging. This exercise was developed by Dr. Julie Masters and Dr. Lynn Hawley at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. And this is called the Future Self Exercise. And it really gets people thinking about the various aspects of their life and how they visualize successful aging for themselves. The idea behind this exercise is to focus on the future self. So if an older adult is doing this exercise, they want to think about what their life would be like in the future, whether it's 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, and caregivers can even do this. I mean, people can do it really at any age. So if the individual doing this exercise is younger, perhaps they want to view what their life would be at 67 or 75 years old. But we start with the middle square, and it has you visualize what your future self looks like physically. So then the older adult or the individual would use that square to either draw or write out or describe what they physically want to age, what aging looks like to them. And then in the top left square, marked environmental and residential, that's where the individual will describe where they would like to reside. The type of living arrangements, the type of geographic area that is ideal for them. And then in the top right corner, the one labeled social world, the individual can indicate who will constitute their social world as they get older. They could include families, friends, pets, maybe people from their religious organization. In the bottom left corner, marked financial support, this is where they'll indicate where their sources of financial support will come from. Is it Social Security, retirement funds, pensions? Maybe there are other sources. And then in the bottom right corner, labeled psychological and spiritual, this is where they can visualize their future psychological and spiritual self. So they can include their personality, cognitive attributes, activities related to psychological development, and then the activities that will give their life meaning. So this exercise can really get a person thinking about aging really from that holistic approach. And these pieces are all interdependent or rely on each other. So think back to that puzzle. These are all kind of like pieces of a puzzle that fit together. And if you think about how they're interrelated, let's say something were to happen to the individual's physical health. How would that impact the other four areas? I love this tool because it really can be a great conversation starter. So once this exercise is complete, the person can share it with their loved ones to help their loved one better understand what successful aging looks like to that individual, and then the family can talk about how can we make that a reality for the older adult. And this holistic approach is really starting to become more and more popular. So I did want to share one quick case study before we dive into the different areas of holistic aging. Almost 10 years ago, the University of Nebraska Medical Center, with Homestead Senior Care as the lead donor, created the Center for Successful Aging. The Homestead Center for Successful Aging was one of the leaders in creating a whole-person approach to caring for the medical center's older adult patients. This came about because they realized that older adult patients were having to go around to all these different buildings on campus to meet with a variety of medical professionals. And there was not always consistent communication channels between the patient's practitioners. So the creation of the Center for Successful Aging helped to centralize that care for older adults and allowed them to focus more on the whole person. And this is the model that the center uses, and the person's wellness is really at the center of the model. To care for the whole person, the services that are offered at the center include geriatric medicine, so that meets the physical component, geriatric psychiatry, which meets the psychological component, and then they also have a fully equipped fitness area, exercise area, and they have a wellness clinic for health screenings and nutritional services. They also engage in clinical trial programs that involve geriatric-specific disorders and offer community education and outreach through this Center of Successful Aging. So they really recognize that these areas of an older adult's life do not operate in a silo. Instead, they're all working together. The healthcare professionals at the center also work to communicate about the healthcare of the older adult patient, which really creates an important continuation of care that can contribute to the older adult's successful aging. And these types of medical centers are starting to pop up across the country, which is exciting to see. So the holistic approach is becoming more and more popular. Okay, so we've talked about what successful aging is, and now we're going to dive deeper into the mind, body, and soul. And as a reminder, these are the three aspects of that holistic aging that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation. And as I go through each of these three areas, I'm going to be pointing out some risk factors to keep an eye out for and some ways to integrate the holistic approach to aging in each of these areas. So we're going to start with talking about the mind aspect. So when we talk about the mind aspect of holistic aging, these are some areas to consider. So is the older adult in tune with their thoughts, feelings, and emotions? Are they getting enough social engagement? Does the older adult engage in intellectual stimulation? And then the last bullet, vocational wellness, refers to an occupation or work of the individual. And we know that many older adults are retired. However, many take up volunteerism in older age, or they might choose to work part-time. So if vocational wellness is important to the person, we need to ask ourselves, do they have an opportunity to engage in vocational wellness? So when evaluating the mind aspect of this holistic approach, there are certain clues that caregivers and professionals can watch out for that can indicate that the mind component might need some additional attention. So let's start by looking at some of those signs. The first is a loss of energy. Persistent fatigue and loss of energy are two signs that an older adult might be struggling. Decreased socialization is another sign that we can be looking out for. If an older adult has lost interest in socializing or has stopped participating in hobbies they typically enjoy, then that could be a signal of depression. It's also possible that there could be an underlying physical health issue that's causing them to pull away from the things they once enjoyed. Maybe there's a loss of interest. Sometimes the signal from a loved one is very drastic, such as major changes in their mood or outlook. For instance, does the older adult go from happy to crying in seconds, or are they coming across more irritable and grumpy than normal? Caregivers need to know that these signs should not be ignored. In fact, they should keep an eye out to see if they persist over a stretch of days or weeks, and then they can also check in with other people involved, maybe friends, neighbors, other people providing care, to see if they're noticing the same changes in behavior as well. So we can look for some of these emotional changes as clues that we might need to help them with the mind aspect of holistic aging. But there's also some environmental clues that we can tune into. And these environmental clues can tell us a lot about the well-being of an older adult. So caregivers should pay close attention to the family member's appearance. Is their clothing dirty or unkempt, or are they neglecting their personal hygiene? If anything in this arena seems off, failure to keep up with good daily grooming habits could be a sign of depression, dementia, or other health issues. It could also be that the person's sense of smell has decreased. And then an unkept household could be another sign, and some things we can look for here. Spoiled food, dirty dishes that are piling up, soiled carpets, excess clutter, bills unpaid, unanswered emails, lack of home maintenance. These are all signs that something might not be right with the older adult. And I do want to acknowledge that people have a wide variety of habits. So for some adults, maybe they've always had a messy house, or they've never really been a snappy dresser. But the theme here is to look for changes in their routines or their habits, because those can be signs that there might be something else happening. Diminished driving skills is another thing to pay attention to. If an older adult is still driving, the caregiver might want to go on a ride with them in the car to look for diminished driving skills, such as a slow response time. Maybe other warning signs would be missing turns because they can't read the sign, or braking quickly to avoid rear-ending someone. These types of issues could indicate that there might be an underlying health issue or cognitive issue. And if the older adult has recently had to give up driving, this could cause depression or social isolation. We talked a lot about how losing independence is a fear of older adults. So a lot of times driving is equated with independence. So if they lose that ability, it could cause depression or social isolation because they're not able to get out to their activities. So caregivers can clue into these sort of signs and help them find alternate forms of transportation if they can no longer get to the activities that they once enjoyed that contributed to that mind aspect of holistic aging. Maybe it's the socializing, the volunteering, and so forth. So we've gone over clues, both environmental and emotional changes that we might need to pay a little more attention to the mind aspect of holistic aging for the individual. But let's go over some helpful tips in this area. Professionals and family members are in a unique position to help older adults figure out which activities will help keep their mind engaged as they get older. First, it's important that older adults stay connected to people that matter. It's important that they have a support system and social network. Staying socially engaged has been shown to keep the mind active, and caregivers can help find ways for their loved one to stay connected and possibly even find opportunities for increased family interactions or intergenerational interactions. And these become especially important as the older adult experiences death of close friends or relatives. As their social circle starts to maybe dwindle over time, they might start to rely on younger family members for that intergenerational social connections. And then controlling stress, that can be extremely helpful in the mind aspect of holistic aging. The changes that are brought about by the aging process, for some, can be stressful and might lead to anxiety and depression. So older adults should find healthy ways to manage their stress. Maybe it's exercising, journaling, or seeking out professional help. It's also important that older adults make time for interests that they enjoy. So if they've always been a gardener, maybe the caregiver helps find a way that they can still garden, maybe bringing a raised flower box onto the back deck, something of that sort. But again, modifying these activities that they really enjoy to their ability level can help them continue to engage in that activity and make sure that that part of the mind, holistic aspect of aging is being fulfilled. It's also important to schedule fun activities on a regular basis to make sure that the older adult is not only socializing, but also gives them something to look forward to on a regular basis. It's also important that they continue to use their mind. The saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. We want to keep them engaged. And it might look different for everyone, but it could be reading, writing, doing crossword puzzles. I know in my family, my grandma loves to play bridge, and I know that that has helped keep her mind sharp and gives her a fun activity to look forward to each week with her friends. And as I mentioned earlier, older adults can always learn new things. So caregivers and professionals can ask the older adult what they've always wanted to do or always wanted to learn and help find a way to meet that goal. Volunteering can also be a powerful way to engage the mind. It provides a social outlet, gives personal meaning and purpose to the individual, and can also help keep them physically active. So that one kind of hits all of the different areas of the holistic aging. And then finally, we could help older adults realize their abilities and, again, focus on what they can do instead of their limitations. Again, keeps that positive mindset going. So these are great tips for the mind, and now we're going to shift the conversation over to the body. I was recently reading an article that talked about the lessons learned so far from the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging. And this study has been following a cohort of individuals since the 1950s to understand the aging process. And the article recapped the lessons learned in the first 50 years of the study. And they found that exercise and physical activity are considered a cornerstone to almost every healthy aging program. People who exercise not only live longer, but they live better. So this body aspect of holistic aging is very important. So here are some areas to consider. In terms of their physical health, what is the person doing to stay physically active? Is their physical health, where are they at in their physical health? Can it be improved? And maybe exercise is a component of that. Are they moving around each day? It might not be getting to the gym, but it could be getting up and moving every couple hours just to stay active. And then is the person getting adequate or proper nutrition? And there are certainly some clues that family caregivers can look for in this area that might indicate a person's body aspect of the holistic aging might need some attention. And one clue specifically is frailty. So I want to talk a little bit more about frailty. What people might not realize is that frailty is not the norm for all aging adults. Research tells us that frailty affects 7% of the population over 65, and then 25 to 40% of those over the age of 80. So while it's not the norm, it's still very important for caregivers to keep a close tab on, especially because frailty can lead to falls, fractures, and other health issues that can compromise their physical health. It can also affect their ability to socialize and engage in activities that they enjoy. So when we educate families on the most common signs of frailty, I've listed some of the most common signs on the screen, and people typically exhibit at least 3 of these characteristics. So if families are noticing that their loved one is exhibiting these, then they certainly need to seek out their physician and set up a doctor's appointment. So the first is shrinking or unintentional weight loss, usually about 10 pounds or more in a year, weakness and muscle loss, exhaustion, or lack of endurance, and then a slow walking speed or reduced overall activity. So again, these are signs that we can be looking out for. And then there are some additional clues, in addition to frailty, that families can be on the lookout for that might indicate that this area of holistic aging might need extra attention. And some of these overlap with symptoms of frailty. But the first is fatigue. It might be difficult for families to tell if this fatigue is chronic or a new symptom. And fatigue can be caused by many things. It could be caused by depression, anemia, a B12 deficiency. So it's really important to encourage families to monitor this and have the person evaluated by a medical professional if the symptoms don't change or they get worse. Balance and mobility is another important clue to look for. Family members should take note if their older adult family member is having difficulty getting up or is unsteady when they're standing. They should watch to see if their gait has changed or if they're using items to balance themselves as they walk from room to room. They may benefit in these cases from a mobility device like a walker or cane, or maybe some exercises that help to improve their balance or mobility. And another physical symptom of underlying health issues is a loss of appetite or weight loss. So if there is unexplained weight loss, again, that might be a physical clue. If an older adult's not eating, they could be at risk nutritionally. And poor nutrition can really cause a variety of issues that can affect the person's stamina and ability to stay active and to keep moving. And then finally, memory loss, forgetfulness, and confusion can also be a clue that there might be an underlying issue. So if any of these clues surface, family members should be encouraged to see a doctor to see, are there any ways that we can help our loved one improve the body aspect of holistic aging? And I want to talk about some tips here. The first tip is to select activities that the person enjoys and keep them moving. As I mentioned earlier, if an older adult's engaging in an activity that they like, then they're more likely to keep doing it. So if possible, exercise regularly. And these could include activities like gardening, walking the dog, stretching, yoga, tai chi, even as simple as taking the stairs or doing a few laps around the kitchen and living room of the home. Also consider strength training, whether it's with weights or resistance bands. And then these first 3 bullet points, of course, can help build the strength, endurance, and flexibility, which can help them continue to enjoy and stay independent as they age, enjoy activities and stay independent as they age. And at the end of the webinar, I'm going to share a resource that will help family caregivers to assess an older adult's fitness level and offer up some easy ways to build activity into their daily life. Another tip to consider is making sure the older adult fuels their body with nourishing foods, integrating fresh and colorful ingredients. Another important tip is to participate in regular health screenings and disease prevention, also making sure that their medications are taken regularly and that their medications are reconciled regularly. So often older adults are taking prescriptions that maybe are expired, or maybe they're interacting with a new drug that a different doctor has recommended. So making sure that the pharmacist is reconciling those is very important. And then again, staying focused on what the older adult can do when it comes to the body. If they can only walk for 5 minutes at a time, that's okay. We need to help them stay positive. Find something that they can engage in that helps keep them active, but they shouldn't compare themselves to their peers because that can really knock that positivity really easily. So again, focus on what they can do to be successful. And of course, they should consult their physician before introducing any exercise into daily routine. All right, now I'm going to shift to the final aspect, the soul. So when we talk about the soul, this is an area that really will look different for everyone. The soul can involve your inner calmness, your openness to creativity, your trust in your inner knowing. It can also involve your spirit, your relationship with yourself, your creativity, your purpose in life, your relationship with a higher power, whether that's spirituality or religion. But the soul is a very important aspect for an older adult's aging journey, especially when it comes to end of life. And in my experiences working with older adults, it's really sad and discouraging when you are working with an older adult at the end of life and they're really wrestling with different aspects of their soul. If somebody is at peace with their soul, they seem to enter end of life with a different perspective. So when we're working with older adults, we want to encourage them to find ways to fill their soul. But I want to share with you the top 5 end-of-life regrets because I think it speaks to the importance of this aspect of holistic aging, the soul portion of it. I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer here, but I think that this is really important in helping us understand ways that we can encourage older adults to engage with different aspects of the soul so that they can have peace with the soul towards end of life. So these come from the book called The Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. And she found that the top 5 regrets of the dying are what's listed on your screen. So I'm going to read through each one of these. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. I wish I didn't work so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I wish that I had let myself be happier. So I would say that all of these regrets are really matters of the soul. So when we're working with older adults, we can give them tips and encouragement to ensure from a holistic perspective that their soul is getting well-deserved attention as they age. So what are some tips for successful aging in the area of the soul? Well, I'm going to share those with you. So in addition to the mind and body activities, it's really important to exercise the soul. And nearly half of older adults who responded to a Home Instead survey said that staying spiritually engaged can be a challenge. So spirituality and matters of the soul will really differ from person to person, but sometimes we need to remind older adults to stay engaged in this soul aspect. So when working with an older adult, we need to be sure to assess for the person's individual preferences and help them determine what's most important. As I mentioned, this area of holistic aging really does look different for everyone. As we mentioned earlier, it's really important to maintain meaning and purpose as you age. So those regrets of the dying, I wish I'd had the courage to live life for myself. I wish I'd had the courage to be happier. We want to make sure that older adults have meaning and purpose in their life, things that they find purposeful and meaningful. And then many older adults, they believe in a higher power, so we need to encourage them to get in touch with that higher power. And this could really be done in a variety of ways depending on the person's preferences. Perhaps it's attending a religious service, a Bible study, maybe it's listening to spiritual music, and so forth. And a lot of people talk about getting in touch with nature. That can be very soul-filling for people. So we need to encourage them, and better yet, provide opportunities for them to appreciate beauty, nature, and life. We need to remind them to stop and smell the roses. And then encourage them to listen to their inner voice in their heart. And perhaps meditation, prayer, contemplating life is good for the person's soul. So we need to encourage them to engage in those activities. And finally, we can encourage them to learn to love themselves. Acceptance in oneself can really bring peace and joy to the soul. So this is a really good list of ways to encourage the soul, but the key is finding out what is important to the older adult and then helping them continue to engage in those sort of activities. So it might be finding a way to get transportation to their religious service. Or if getting out in nature is important, finding ways that the older adult can still do so, even if they might be limited in mobility. Or maybe it's getting together with family and friends. Maybe that's really important to them. It fuels their soul. So again, we need to customize this to the individual. So finally, I want to move to the resource slide. But as I do, I want to remind you all that helping an older adult move towards a holistic approach to aging doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be hard work. Oftentimes, it's those little changes and encouragement that can really go a long way. But when we take a more holistic approach to the aging process and we look at the whole person, the mind, body, and soul as one big puzzle and not the individual pieces, it can help improve the life of the older adult by enhancing their quality of life and encouraging their independence, which all can ultimately lead to more successful aging for them. So with that, I wanted to share some resources for you. In terms of that body aspect, we have getmommoving.com. We have that senior fitness test that I had mentioned. When it comes to ensuring older adult safety, there's a senior emergency kit that's available. When it comes to volunteerism, the nationalservice.gov and Volunteer Match are great websites that can help older adults find opportunities to volunteer in their area. And then amillionthanks.org, I wanted to share that. That's a really unique website where older adults, if they're homebound or maybe they think that they can't make a big difference, this organization takes cards and letters and sends them out to veterans or active military. So that could be one way that they could engage. If you want to learn about more holistic aging, more of the in-depth or the ins and outs of holistic aging, want to learn more about the acupuncture, chiropractic, the things I didn't cover, I wanted to list the American Holistic Health Association on here. And then also agingwithdignity.com, because it's an important site that can help our older adults age with dignity. And as they start to look at holistic aging, we start to look at that soul aspect, being at peace, especially towards end of life. Having all of your affairs in order can be really important in providing peace to the soul, especially for those that have family members that they might be leaving behind. Sharing those wishes with them can make a big difference. So, and then there's also Simple Meds for medication management, if that's a part of the health and wellness aspect of holistic aging, that could be helpful. And then homeinstead.com for home care services that could help the older adults possibly get to those appointments, those doctor's appointments, or get to that religious service, those sorts of things. So just wanted to share those resources with you. I know that there are many resources out there, but these are just some of them that I have found. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. Again, this is kind of a newer topic that we're covering for the 2018 webinar series, but I'm happy to open it up for any questions that you might have at this time.
All right. Thanks very much, Lakeland. Great presentation as always. Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
Everyone, it is time for the Q&A portion, so if you have any questions for Lakeland for what we've been talking about here, please send in those questions at this time using that questions box that you see there. First question here for you, Lakeland, is how do we meet these needs and the tips you've offered for people who are aging in place alone and without family? This is going to be a growing problem in upcoming generations who have no one.
That is a really good point. The number of older adults living in isolation is likely to increase, so that is certainly a concern. Well, and if you know of an older adult who is, living in isolation, they don't have any family member or friends, getting them connected with their local area agency on aging can be a great first step. They have, a lot of those agencies on aging have programs such as like Meals on Wheels, where they're getting nutritious meals on a regular basis that can fuel their the body portion. It can also fuel the socialization aspect, the mind and soul. And the area agencies on aging, you can find your local area agency on aging at n4a.org. They also have volunteer programs where seniors can come out and maybe do some possible home repairs. There's also some services such as a bath aid, or if they need help maintaining their environment, some homemaker services. So these types of services can really help to provide for the needs of the older adult that's living in isolation. When it comes to the socialization, I wish that there was a quick and easy fix for that. But looking at volunteer organizations, maybe they are connected to a church or a synagogue in their local community. Perhaps within that religious organization, I know at least the churches that I've attended over my lifetime have an outreach committee where they will go visit older adults who are homebound or people who are in the hospital. So those can be options for people who are homebound. If they can afford services, home care services such as Home Instead or others can come in and provide that much needed socialization. But I know not everyone has the resources, so tapping into the Area Agency on Aging would be a great option for that individual. So thank you for that question. If anyone else has suggestions, please comment them in, because there will be a growing need for it. And as a society, we need to come together and continue to find solutions for that. So thank you for that question.
All right, thanks, Lakeland. Next question. What is your best advice for dealing with an older adult who is stubborn and refuses help related to aging topics?
Oh gosh, that's always a challenge, isn't it? I've worked with a few stubborn older adults over my lifetime, and there's really no magic fix for any one situation, and every situation is so different. So sometimes it takes a medical professional. Sometimes the older generations see their medical professional as an authority. So if the older adult is hearing it from a family member and is not accepting or receptive to the changes that need to be made, perhaps having it come from a third party, a physician, a medical professional, sometimes that will help, or even an outside party, maybe a neighbor or a friend. Enlisting the help of someone outside of the situation, hearing it from multiple people, can sometimes help with an older adult who is a little more stubborn. And sometimes, if their behavior is might be harmful to their health, or if their behavior is if it's not going to change, then they'll have to leave their home. Sometimes explaining the reason for the change. If you continue to use your walker, it could prevent falls, which can keep you at home hopefully longer, as opposed to the alternative having to move, or so again, trying to explain the why behind it, how it's for the person's continued independence. Because as we talked about, one of the biggest fears is losing their independence. So if we can explain, if we implement this little change, it can help you maintain independence. We're not trying to take it away from you. We're trying to help you maintain it. Sometimes those types of approaches can be effective as well. So I hope that that's helpful, and good luck. I wish there was a cookie cutter answer for that, but you might just have to try different ways from different angles.
All right, thank you. Lakeland, next question. How do you encourage an older adult who you know is depressed?
That's a really tough situation as well. Depression, it's going to look different in different situations. So if it's depression due to loneliness or isolation, perhaps it's creating a schedule of events over the course of the month, scheduling a couple activities that month for the older adult to look forward to, where they're socializing or engaging in activities that they once enjoyed, can be a way to lift their spirits. Or if they have a favorite family member, maybe that lives out of town, scheduling regular phone calls with them. But really, if depression is becoming detrimental to their health, for instance, if they aren't eating because they're depressed, or they're staying in bed all day, those could be detrimental to their health. It could cause a fall. They're not eating properly. They're not getting the nutrition that they need. If they're staying in bed all day, they might lose muscle strength. So that's if you see depression, it's not changing over time. If you're trying these social activities, it's not lifting their spirits, it's time to talk to their medical professional, because it might be that they can help. But again, trying to engage them in activities that they really enjoy, creating opportunities for social engagement. And maybe it's they need to reconnect with areas of their soul. Maybe it's meditation or prayer or attending a religious service that could help lift their spirits. And maybe they're depressed because of grief, and which is completely understandable. Maybe grief counseling is something to introduce in that situation, or frequent visits to the cemetery, something of that sort. So again, it's going to look a little bit different for everyone, but those are some suggestions that I hope you find helpful. Great question.
All right, Lakeland. Well, we have unfortunately reached the end of our hour here, and it's time for us to wrap up, but I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, and I hope to see a lot of you at the American Society on Aging Conference later this month. I'll be at the Home Instead booth, and I have a roundtable discussion on daughters in the workplace. So hope to see you all there, and if not, I'll talk to you all next month. Thank you.